So this video is based on opportunity cost, which is a major topic, especially in terms of an introductory topic to business studies and economics, especially microeconomics. Now, when we're considering opportunity cost, the definition is the cost of the next alternative foregone. And what that means is, well, in terms of explaining what it means, I usually use the diagram that you can see, the door A and the door B. Now, in terms of, imagine you've got a choice. You have to either pick door A or pick door B. Now, if you pick door A, then everything that was behind door B, all the opportunities, all the experiences, everything that you might have received is now lost, okay, because you've opted to go for door A, and vice versa if you pick door B. So in other words, opportunity cost is kind of the door that you didn't take, and everything that came with that door. Now, that's just one example of what opportunity cost is, but in real life scenario, in terms of business environments, you have to consider in terms of the basic economic problem. Now, the basic economic problem tells you that our wants and our needs are, I suppose, kind of unlimited. We're always wanting, we're always needing goods. But the resources that are available for those goods are actually scarce, they're limited. We haven't got endless supplies, especially in the short term. So if you think about the factors of production for a business, I've just borrowed this image from Tutor to You. It relates to all the resources, all the inputs in order to supply goods and services to an economy. So it looks at land, it looks at labour, it looks at enterprise, it looks at capital. Now, if we think about these resources, for example, within a country, we've only got so much labour. If all the labour is already employed and we've got full employment, then where do we get that labour from? In the short term, it's very, very difficult to suddenly increase labour. Maybe in the long term, we could boost immigration, or we could think of other ways to boost the population. But in the short term, it's fixed. So our resources, if we need high levels of labour and we haven't got that labour, then you could say the resource of labour is limited and it will not help us to match the needs of our wants and our needs. If you think about land, again, or the resources that are available, oil is always a good example. Oil is obviously a scarce resource. It's going to run out at some point. And because it's going to run out, everything that oil is used for in terms of production is going to struggle unless they can find an alternative. If you think about capital goods, again, if you think about even finance or if you think about technology, we've only got so much. Unless we carry out R&D, research and development, and really kind of develop technologies and develop machinery, at some point it will be restricted and it will take time to implement new resources. It's like, for example, if you've got a factory and it's producing so many goods, but then there's more demand and more demand and more demand, you're going to have to build another factory. But at the same time, you can't do it overnight. It'll take finance, it'll take more labour, it'll take more capital goods, it'll take more land. It'll need time for you to build that other factory to provide and supply for those goods. So in other words, there's a restriction, there's a limited supply of resources for those goods that are wanted and or needed. Because of that, it creates an opportunity cost. Because what businesses have to do and what suppliers have to do is they have to opt, well, what shall we use those resources for? And if they choose one item over another item, then all the benefits that might have come from the other item is lost. But that's the choice that they have to make. Now, within this video, I'm going to look at 3 examples of opportunity cost. I'm going to just come up with a simple example now. Let's imagine that you've got a restaurant or a cafe, and they've got a production of pizza and they've got a production of sandwiches. Maybe on one day they've got a limited supply of a resource such as cheese. Okay, cheese is used for both sandwiches and used for maybe pizza. Okay, maybe it's a special type of cheese sandwich that they offer. Now imagine you've got a scenario where they've only got so much cheese. So what they have to do is make a decision. Are we going to prioritise pizza or are we going to prioritise sandwiches? Now if they prioritise pizza, then what we've got is we've got B, okay, here. And what that means is they've got this amount of output of pizza, which is quite high in comparison to the small output of sandwiches. Now, what you may say is, but that could be good because there could be a lot of demand for pizza, it could bring in a lot of revenue. But there might have also been a lot of demand for sandwiches. So all that demand will not be able to be met because they've prioritised pizza. There might be customers who only like sandwiches and don't like pizza, well, they'll lose now that product. However, they could go for C, and that would be prioritising sandwiches, but the same applies. Now, they could try to balance it out and go for A, and A could be in a position where it helps them to kind of balance it out and reduce maybe the opportunity cost for both, but there's still an opportunity cost. They're still going to sacrifice units of pizza and units of sandwiches. Now, a really good example and a historical example of a whole economy is the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, this is a perfect illustration of the opportunity cost for a government. Now, the Soviet Union, if you're not aware of it, it was a communist state. It was a command economy. And what I mean by that is the government made the decisions for the economy. They believed that all citizens were equal. And as I've put here, Soviet Union was a command economy, meaning they made decisions on resources regarding their citizens. They believed that resources should be distributed equally amongst the economy. So they decided how it was going to be distributed. Now, the industry of the Soviet Union was usually divided into two major categories, and I've just labelled it Group A and Group B. Now, Group A was based on heavy industry. Quite a lot of that was actually military weapons at that point. And Group B was consumer goods, and what I mean by that is just the everyday goods that you purchase from the shops, the food, the clothes, shoes, housing, and so on. Now, a major issue of the Soviet Union was, I suppose, the internal conflicts, the civil conflicts between the people of the Soviet Union and the government. At that time, the Soviet Union were really prioritising Group A products. And they were investing within military weapons. They were spending a lot of resources, using a lot of the resources that were available on military weapons, when those resources could have actually been used for consumer goods, which would have benefited the society. What the society didn't believe was the military weapons were needed and they were a waste. So again, it caused a lot of civil unrest, and that was a problem. Now, to illustrate this kind of within a diagram, I've drawn a PPF again. Now, as the PPF shows, you've got military weapons or Group A products, heavy obviously industry, or you've got consumer goods for the everyday person. Now, the issue was that they were opting for B, and they were going more for military weapons. But that meant that there was a massive sacrifice for consumer goods, and these were the goods that the citizens needed. These were the goods that it was not only their wants but their needs as well. And because they were sacrificing the resources that would have been used for consumer goods and using them more instead for military weapons, it was, again, like I said before, it was causing civil unrest. So that was one of the reasons for the issues with the Soviet Union, as well as many other historical factors. Now, in today's terms, I'm looking at the UK economy, and I'm seeing an opportunity cost with the NHS. A couple of years ago, there was a documentary on television called NHS 2 billion a week and counting, which was a brilliant documentary based on opportunity cost for the NHS. Now, in terms of the Conservative government, they have been accused of underfunding the NHS, especially with the increase in population. They're believing that the funding that they're provided isn't adequate enough for the population, and therefore they haven't got enough resources for the needs of the patients or the population of the UK. They have to, obviously the NHS have to spend on research and development for new medicines. They have to spend on equipment and, again, capital goods for treatments. They've got lots and lots of costs per patient, and depending on the illness or the disease or whatever it might be that the patient is suffering, the cost could be higher or lower. So what this documentary looked at is, well, because of the funding or because of the lack of funding, the NHS cannot treat every single patient. So some treatments, they actually have to turn it down. And they were calculating on average that maybe 1 in 3 would get the funding and get the treatment. But that meant that 2 other people missed out. So again, the NHS had an opportunity cost. Now, their job was to work out the clinical and cost effectiveness of drugs and treatments to ensure the NHS in England gets the value for the money and patients get the best possible treatments. But some patients were not getting that treatment because of that. And they had to, their job was to pick which patients should get the funding and not. I mean, that's an impossible job, a horrendous job. But that's what they had to do. That was the opportunity cost involved. I mean, that's quite an extreme opportunity cost, because that meant if they picked patient 1, patient 2 and patient 3, their illness, whatever that was wrong with them could actually get worse, get severe, and especially if they couldn't afford private treatment. So you can look at it from that point of view. Now, in terms of other examples, let's think of location, because we've looked at the topic of location recently. Location, if you had 2 premises, the opportunity cost of picking one premises over the other premises could be great. It could be in terms of footfall. It could be in terms of the cost of the actual property itself. It could be the revenue you could take. So opportunity cost, the reason why it's one of the introductory topics for both economics and business studies is because it can be used throughout every topic. It's a really, really important topic to look at. So, for example, the opportunity cost of selecting to be a sole trader rather than a partnership, the opportunity cost of picking to do franchising as an organic growth technique rather than maybe an external growth technique. There's opportunity costs in every single topic.